My motto in life was, life is a daring, excuse me, I skipped a word here and I proved it, but I skipped a word. It should be, life is a daring adventure or nothing at all. And Helen Keller said that. So this brings us to the lows of the cruising life that I had on the agenda. Because you can't avoid every storm, no matter how hard you try. I wanted adventure, okay? But now I had it. My book series is named In Search of Adventure and Moments of Bliss. And we thought we'd have a lot of moments of bliss and maybe a little adventure, but maybe not something like a force 10 storm. So what I found out is that when you go out there, you don't have to search for adventure. Adventure will come to you. Believe me. We had a great time cruising on the Spanish Main, underway from Bonaire to Cartagena, Colombia, where we were going to take a break before we would go on to the San Blas Islands and then through the Panama Canal. And we'd had a really good time in Las Rocas, right off the beautiful islands off the Venezuelan coast, and part of Venezuela, actually. And then we sailed the ABCs to Bonaire. And in Bonaire, I checked the forecast, because I was the weather woman, and it called for, quote, reinforced trades, unquote, for the next week. And that was normal there for January. I didn't think too much of it. There were no lows. There were no storms on the radar at all. And we'd had trades, crossing the Atlantic, and had a beautiful time. And the catamaran goes fast. And if we go with the wind, we should be fine. However, we headed out bound for Cartagena, and then we started the third day, we started to see a buildup. On our third day out, and it got a little bit nerve-wracking. And then we were approaching Barranquilla, which is a jutting cape past the outflow of the Magdalena River. So you've got sort of a wind tunnel effect. You've got high mountains, you have a low river, and you're approaching one of the top capes in the world. The wind was maintaining a force 7, and we were eating dinner then. Then it was gusting to a force 8 gale as the night fell. And then by 9 o'clock that night, it was a steady force 8, gusting to 9. And then it was a force 9. And our boat was varying between 9 and 13 knots. Now, you monohaulers, this is a catamaran, so okay, 13 knots, but it's fast for us because we're not racers. And then about 2300, an hour till midnight, all hell broke loose. And the wind was a constant force 9 with gusting to 10, and that would have been a true wind speed of over 50 knots. So I like to read just a couple paragraphs. I have to change to my reading glasses. From my first book, Maiden Voyage, in the prologue of it, where I discuss this storm. And it's called Force 10, and that's that story part of the book. Won first place in the Solis prize for best story of story told on the water, basically, cruising in a boat. Howling like a pack of ravenous wolves, the insatiable wind chases Pacific bliss through the churning seas off the lawless Colombia coast. With a maddening roar, it claws through the rolled up bimini shades surrounding the cockpit, tearing fasteners and ripping them loose. The straps flail wildly against the hardtop, adding to the pandemonium. The seats come alive like demented sea monsters, flopping up and down and straining at their snaps. Stoic Richard, our crew, controls the helm, helping our autopilot maintain some semblance of control. Captain Gunter, my husband, struggles to stand upright, inching forward during the pauses, if you can call them that. between each violent gust. I imagined those loosened straps gouging his eyes, the beginning of a downhill slide from chaos to catastrophe as one problem leads into another, and eventually we're a short crew and we're into a survival situation, our own perfect storm. Inside the salon with my friend Phyllis, Richard's wife, I stare at the display at the nav station, Force 10. My stomach clenches like the jaws of a shark. My tongue turns to cotton. There are only 12 wind states, Force 12 being a hurricane. A 43-foot catamaran cannot survive a hurricane. So obviously, I can't tell you the whole story. We made it though because we're here. So we ended up having to do a turn in that after the wind had slowed down to, I believe it was a force 7 when we had to make the turn, and down to Cartagena. And we came to our berth that we had reserved in Club Nautico. And this is now the second night after the storm, and here you see the sun is setting. Everything's beautiful. The skyscrapers of the city are in the background, and we're having a beautiful time at the club. And cruisers at the club said that that is one of the worst capes of all the capes. You've got the Cape of Good Hope, you've got Cape Horn, but this cape is not too much is said about it because not too many cruisers go there. But I thought the weather forecast was really off, not to call that reinforced trade winds when you have a force 10, and not to call it a storm. Anyway, we chilled out. We went to the old city of Cartagena and went walking around, and we basically spent a week getting up our courage to keep on. And now I'm skipping all the way over to another low, and because in the middle was the South Pacific, and South Pacific was Pacific. And really, we didn't have anything bad happen to us there of note. And now we're into the last third of the world. And we have gone from Bundaberg, Australia, up all the way to the northernmost cape of Australia and sailed across the Gulf of Carpentaria and gone over all the Northern Territories, which is all Aborigine land, no marinas, of course, no anything. I mean, parts of it are not even charted. And then ending up in Darwin. And in Darwin, we joined a rally, and we came from Darwin through to Timor, Alor, Indonesia, Rinca, Komodo, where the dragons are, ending up in Bali. And then from Bali, this next story starts. We are heading now into Singapore, and we're going through the South China Sea on our passage. So we're going through the Malacca Straits. Excuse me. We picked up one crew, Nolan, who joined us because he'd always wanted to sail on a catamaran. And we had some fun with him. We crossed the equator. It was the third time for us, the first time for him. And Gunter's shaking his hand, and he's just having a blast sailing with us. And then he had his birthday. I think it was the same day, right, as Gunter. And I don't remember how old he turned, but Gunter turned 70 on that day. And we normally don't have champagne underway, but this time we did. And we were sailing with our buddy boat, Simpatica. Simpatica was with us on the Indonesia rally, but they left early in the morning. I don't know why. Anyway, they struck a reef and they wrecked a sail drive. But on a catamaran, you have two. So, they were able to keep going, but they wanted to get their boat fixed in Singapore. And they asked if they could sail with us because they just felt better with a buddy boat. So did we, so that was fine. And we were having a good time. And Wences, this is Wences, the captain, and his wife, and they had this toddler on board. And we were singing and dancing and having a blast. They were, he was from Argentina. They were singing all kinds of tangos and you name it. I mean, fast music. And so no one gets on the cabin, top of the cabin of our Katana. And we're singing, we're sailing on our way across the sea. And it was just a nice time. And in cruising, what happens is there's highs and lows, as I'm going into tonight. So whenever you're on a big high like that, watch out, because this was a moment of bliss. It was pure joy. And then this happens. This Indonesian fishing trawler approaches Pacific Bliss. It's humongous, and it's sort of headed diagonally toward our starboard. Gunter speeds up so that she can clear our stern ahead of Simpatica, who's now following us. But the more we speed up, the more she changes course to meet us midship. And she passes close to our stern, and then she turns. And 3 grungy men holding a jerry can come up, and she's like, cut us off. She's between Simpatica and us. And Simpatica is obviously taking this picture. You can see the Katana sail in the background there. It looked like they said they wanted diesel. And that's what I got Nolan, he was resting at the time up, is to translate because they only spoke Indonesian. But I guess him speaking Singaporean, he figured close enough, that's what they want, diesel. Well, we were going to be short on diesel because we had been motor sailing part of the time, and we had to get to Singapore. We didn't really want to stop on the way, although there might have been some possibilities. So we said, let's go over to Simpatica. They might have enough diesel to spare. So Simpatica filled up the jug that they're putting over with diesel, and they turned around and they were on their way. So we thought. And then we look back, and here they are. They're coming back, and they're coming straight at us. And we're thinking, uh-oh, maybe they were just scouting us out. So they're heading toward Pacific Bliss, and Gunter is already readying his flare guns. We don't have real guns on board. The men are going toward the bow as if they're going to board us. And then no one talks to them. And he said, oh, I misunderstood. They wanted motor oil instead. And Gunter said, that we have. And so we gave them some motor oil. And then that was the end of this pirate attack, which wasn't a pirate attack, of course. So we didn't think too much about that episode. We were too busy navigating the Singapore Straits. But however, when we reached Thailand, then we were sort of forced to face our fear of pirates, because pirates have been lurking for centuries in the Malacca Straits, which was declared by the UN as the most dangerous in the world for pirates. But the second most dangerous was coming up, and that would be Pirate Alley. And so from Thailand, we faced an issue, and that was we're going to have to cross the Indian Ocean all the way to the Arabian Peninsula. And it was like, okay, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. I have this page in the book and the quote by George Adair. Well, what lied across that other side for us? Well, we would go to Salalah, Oman, and then we'd have the dreaded passage through Pirate Alley. And Pirate Alley was where they not only robbed boats, they kidnapped and killed the owners. I'm sure you've all heard about that place. And then we'd end up in Aden, Yemen. And yeah, that Aden, Yemen, where the USS Cole was bombed. Really nice. So we had sort of a personal crisis of the worst kind, because for the very first time, and this is now what, about 6 years into our 8-year voyage, we had a personal crisis that affected our relationship. So many, I hear something in the background, but I don't know whose it is. So many cruisers split up when they're on a world circumnavigation, and there are many reasons. The sea tests every part of one's soul, but the most common one is that one partner will want to continue and the other one does not. And Gunter often threatened, it's not here, we don't have anything on. Okay, Gunter often threatened to quit. And he would say, hey, I'm going to sell this bucket. And I would...
I can't listen to it when you do it.
What?
I can't listen to it when you put it on your headphones.
Well, you told me you were going.
Well, I can hear it. I was listening. You don't have to sit and look at it.
Okay, should I continue? Okay, so...
You remember my hearing is not so good as yours.
Okay.
Okay, so Gunter would say, I'm going to sell this bucket, and I would tend to say, no, that's okay. And then sometimes I'd say, I think we should sell this bucket. And Gunter would say, no, it's not that bad. But this time, I think Gunter really meant it. He was talking about us.
I got to get my speaker working here.
Okay.
John, can you get on mute for us, please?
Hello?
John, can you get on mute?
For John.
Thank you.
Okay. So Gunter was thinking maybe he'd like to buy or rent a home in Thailand and just sail around that area for a while. And then I felt, well, heck, if we stopped now, we've never continued, because I knew too many cruisers that were partway on a circumnavigation. They stopped someplace and they never continued. And I started wondering, well, did Gunter change during this? We'd also both been really goal-oriented people. And I thought that would happen and that would continue. But then maybe in the South Pacific, maybe Gunter had turned into sort of a flexible, go with the flow type of person. So I thought, boy, I don't know what's going to happen. So I said, I tell you what, if you don't want to go, I'll get another captain and we'll take the boat and we'll go on, complete the mission, and then I'll come back and get you in Thailand. Well, that was a no-go. He said, there is no way in hell I'm going to let you do that. So we kept on going, and we took this trip. This is Thailand, Similan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and then we get to Oman, and we're going through Pirate Alley. This is me perching on the top of one of the buildings in Oman. This is a photo of, we had one crew, Chris, on that part of our voyage, 24-year-old Australian who is just a really good worker, a real good partier, but when he hit shore, but he was really game for anything. So that's us entering Oman. You can see the oil rigs there. And from there to Yemen would be about a 660-mile gauntlet. And as I mentioned before, prior years, I'd say all the years prior to 2005, sailors could simply resolve the situation by paying cash, electronics, or supplies. But then after that, the modus operandi changed to shoot, to kill, or kidnap, and then take the vessel. And then they would use a sailboat as the mother boat to attack even larger boats. And you know that type of story from Captain Phillips, if you've watched that movie. So in March of 2005, the U.S. vessels Mahdi and Gandalf fended off two diesel-powered boats who fired on them. shooting to kill. But in this case, one of them had a shotgun, and they shot the pirates, the two boats, all of them. So I think we were maybe lucky when we went to Pirate Alley, because the word had spread around Somalia and so on that just a minute, it's just not a piece of cake to take one of these boats, one of these sailboats. And then I say in the text on this slide, the Chandlers, who were on Lynn Rival, were attacked, and that was in 2009. That's after we went through. And they were held captive in Somalia for 388 days. And then, of course, we all know about Quest from California, and those pirates eventually killed their hostages. So it was no easy thing to think about going through there. I wanted to form a convoy for sure. I wouldn't have minded if we could have found someone that could be a lead boat with an AK-47. But then how do you know they wouldn't turn on you? At any rate, that didn't happen. None of us had arms on board other than flares. But we did have some meetings, and the 5 of us got together and we set these rules down. And I don't know if you can read it, the text is pretty small, but we basically set waypoints as Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie rather than numbers. So when we talked and communicated with each other, we would first set up a really elaborate method of communication. We would say change in a certain channel, and then we would say switch, and then we would go to a different channel, and then we would use the VHF sparingly, no chit chat at all, no exchanging of recipes. And another group ran without lights, but we figured that was more dangerous, especially with a catamaran. We didn't like that idea at all. And so we opted to run with lights at night, but to close in together, like within what would be sight if it had been during the day, and to use our radar. And then we put a big note on our whole notes. Everyone posted this at their nav station on their boat. Fishermen always approach during the daytime. So if you've got some little boat approaching you, assume the worst. It's not going to be a fisherman, and close up as close as you can without, of course, hitting your neighbor. We did make it through without any major incidents, and this is now what the harbor of Aden looks like. And we were, there was no docks, so, we were just anchored there. And but we did go inland, and we saw a lot of beautiful things in Sana'a, the capital. And it's a shame now that with the Yemen civil war, they've destroyed a lot of those beautiful tower buildings that we saw. Now I get into the transition between the lows and the highs, because being in Arabia, the Gulf of Arabia, well, that's probably a little bit of a low, but seeing a sunset, the Arabian sunsets that are so fantastic, that's a real high. And I happened to catch this oil tanker going right in front of the setting sun right here. Another high is always cruisers helping each other, and all over the world. We always got help whenever we wanted to. People would come together, sort of like maybe in the US with the old barn raising in the farming communities. Well, here you had putting on new sails and this and that, climbing the mast, because Gunter's a little heavy to climb, to be hoisted onto a mast. If there were only the 2 of us, I was the one that had to go up the mast. Wherever you go in the world, you'll find cruisers and have a good time. And no matter what's happened out at sea, when you get back, the beer and the wine is flowing, and everyone's having just a great time, and they're telling stories. And before you know it, the storms get bigger, the fish get bigger, and it's really a lot of fun. And of course, as you all know, the thrill of sailing with the wind is just the greatest. And we really liked whenever we could, we took in a cultural experience. In this case, it was the Pacific Arts Festival in Palau, but the dancers you see with us are from Papua New Guinea. Don't they look fierce? There's Gunter, and here I am. And our favorite culture experience was probably in Vanuatu. That's the old New Hebrides Islands near Caledonia, and then not too far from Australia. And we were on our way to Australia at the time we stopped there. We were able to see the installation of a new chief in one of the islands, and they had the snake dance festivals. They showed us how to make lop lop in an earth oven, which is sort of a pizza that they would top with all kinds of things, including dried fish. And then one other thing we always like to do is walk in a village. If we could go someplace traveling and just walk through the village, we would. This is walking through the village of Ulagan in the Maldives. And this is walking through a village that was having a contest, a beauty contest. And some of the winners are talking with a really good looking guy here. I just made for a nice shot. Boys are from Thailand and stilt fishermen in Sri Lanka. I probably got hundreds and hundreds of photos like this in fact, I have a slideshow, children around the world, just children. A guide in Adams Peak, Sri Lanka. And this is the traditional dress in Sana'a, Yemen, where we went. And yes, they do wear these daggers. I mean, this is what they walk around wearing. I mean, he was not dressed up for any ceremony. He's walking around Sana'a, and I asked to take his picture. A lot of times someone will sit for a portrait. And in this case, this was a family of a fisherman. And the daughter was invited us to a haircutting celebration. And this was a tradition that when the girl came of age, that they would cut her hair. And so he invited us to that, and then he asked us to come to his house and take pictures. And I said that I would give him a copy. I had a printer on board, and I would give him a copy of the picture for his home. And so I took one here and also one of the entire family. And of course, sunsets all over the world. Who doesn't love sunsets? I think one of my favorites was Hamilton Island in the Whitsundays. And then this first landing in Fiji. Sunrises. Well, when you go on night watches, you have sunrises at sea, and they're just so beautiful. This was sailing into Alor, Indonesia at dawn. This is what I call a creation sunrise, where you've got a cloud, and then out of it is this burst of glory. And of course, night watches, I miss those. Gunter and I both miss night watches. Here we were sailing to Gibraltar. Here you see the moon rise as we're doing an overnight in Costa Rica. And then finally, the biggest high of all was our last voyage. We had left the boat in Turkey and gone back to San Diego, had some repairs done on the boat while we were gone when it was on the hard. And then we went from Turkey, sailing to Greece, the boot of Italy, Sicily, a little bit into Calabria there, and then over Sardinia, Corsica, and all the way back to Perpignan. Well, Perpignan's the nearest bigger city, but actually it was Cannes where we crossed our path. So the biggest high of all is closing the loop, crossing the line about 1 mile out of Cannes, and you see right in the background there is Canea Plage, where we left 8 years earlier and about the same time of the year. This was the end of August.